Hedge funds have made billions of dollars copying insider trades, and there's a reason it's one of the most studied signals in the market and why every professional investor pays attention to it. The trick is most insider trades are totally useless though. You have to sift through all the noise, get rid of all the scheduled trades, all the tiny trades, all the trades that just don't mean anything to really hone in on which insider trades have signal. We built a program that helps us find these high signal insider trades at CEOWatcher.com. And today is day one of leaking high signal insider trades every day until they stop us. Let's get started by looking at the number of insider purchases versus sales over a couple different time frames. If we're looking at the weekly, today we're looking at the filings from August 27th. Now remember, we've already filtered out a lot of the noisy trades. So any trades that are for taxes, stock purchase plans, dividend reinvestment, all kinds of stuff we've already filtered. So this is only the trades that are potentially high signal. And so we've got 23 purchases and 135 sales. So really a pretty low day, especially on the purchase side, which we kind of see a trend here over the last few weeks of buying coming down a little bit. Taking a look now at the percent of trades that are buys, we're also seeing us come in under the median in terms of the percent of trades that were a buy. So only 17% of all the insider trades today, or at least in this subset that we have, were under the median. Looking at some larger time frames, the week's not quite over, but it looks like we're going to come in close to median, maybe a little under in terms of the percent of trades over this week that were buys. And we had a pretty good run going there for a few weeks of really high insider buying. We also found some really good trades during that time. What we really want to see though, if we come over, let's look at quarterly because it gives us a better look over the long picture. What we really want to see is these massive, massive green sticks of very high insider buying. And you'll notice if you go look at stock charts for what these quarters were, the end of 2018, if you'll remember, was a big dip in the stock market followed by a huge recovery. COVID, of course, was the biggest buying quarter that we've seen in a very long time. You also then have all of 2022. So this is all 2022 right here. They had high insider buying, which again, the market struggled in 2022 and it bottomed out somewhere like the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, where again, in the April quarter of 2023, we saw buying pick up again, which is really when the market started to increase. So as of right now, this quarter, we're tracking under the median line, but we had earnings in July, which earnings season tends to be fewer insider buying because they're in their blackout period. So I would expect this quarter to probably come in around average. So nothing too interesting to look at here. I think we're pretty much going to be, about the median. However, we are probably on the near term, at least a little bit of a downturn here in terms of how much insider buying is going on. You can ignore this section here. So this was earnings. And as you can see, way lower insider buying during earnings season, but that's very typical. You'll see those dips all during most earnings seasons. Now, the caveat being, if you see like this during April of this year, that it was earnings season, but it's when Trump had the tariffs, insider buying was still very high during this time. That is definitely a signal. So remember, we're looking for unscheduled and abnormal insider trades, specifically if the insider has a history of successful insider trading, a very good sign. And then bonus points if it's, a particularly large insider trade or there's multiple insiders trading. And the price action we'll also look at as well. If they're buying the dip, selling the rip, or buying with continued momentum, any of that stuff can also be interesting. But we're trying to find just the weird and high signal insider trades. So let's head over to CEO Watcher here. Let me clear these filters and let's go take a look at the most interesting trades from today. We'll set the file that date to the 27th. We will change. I like to look at a little bit longer of a time frame here. So I'm going to look at 6-month insider returns and the bullish only, meaning only their purchases. We'll look at purchases for now. Let's start with the purchases and then let's filter by or sort by the transaction value. If you go to the website, we also have these cool feeds with like the highest signal buys, sells, unusual 10b5-1 sales that you can look at, but that's for you to look at on your own. All right, so we're just going to go through the top of this list here and take a quick look at some of the most interesting trades or some of the biggest trades really. If I were you and you were to come to this website, one of the things that you could do is just sort by this insider buy column here, and we'll sort obviously by the good, and then just go take a look here. I mean, some of this like one share, obviously not very interesting, but some of these other ones, just come take a look at what some of the best insiders are buying. But again, that's for you to do on your own. We're going to sort it by the largest insider purchases for today. And just taking a quick look at some of these tickers to see if there's any kind of group buying or anything like that going on. We see a bunch of insider buying at Sharps Technology, which, if I remember correctly, is a crypto like treasury company. Private place. Yeah, Solana Digital Asset Treasury. I mean, just a total grift of a company. It's down 100% almost in the last 2 years. They are way up now ever since announcing that crypto treasury move. So a high risk play if you want to try to take advantage of the crypto treasury, but probably a little late here, just not even worth looking at in my opinion. So not interesting to me. What else do we have here? TPVG, this one is interesting. Well, we'll talk about it in a second, but we've seen, I guess as this chart shows, bunch of insider buying recently, which is definitely pretty interesting. Another one that we've seen a bunch of insider buying at recently here is Amrise, which we'll take a look at that one. A couple buys here at Avidea Bancorp. All right, let's get started. Let's start up here at Reynolds Consumer Products. Taking a look at the chart, we can see a little bit of a dip here, down 20% if we extend this out, down 20% over the last year, but it's flattened out quite a bit here over the last 3 months, and it's actually up 5% in the last 3 months, which we still got the long-term dip, but we're seeing some short-term turnaround, which could be interesting. We'll also notice a lot of buying, no selling at all for almost a year. The only sale being back here by Chris, which fantastic timing on that sale, Chris, which it looks like literally the only sale ever that's happened at this company was by him. And the stock is down 25% since he made that sale. So pretty interesting there. We'll also notice, just kind of looking back, now the timing of insiders historically, maybe not particularly great. If we just take a look at these green dots for when insiders bought, definitely not great. The only thing that kind of makes these more recent buys interesting is look how big the green candles are, or the green sticks here, the green bars, I guess. Those show how much, like dollar amount, was bought. And as you can see from this chart down here, we've got $5 million bought in this Q3 of 2025 versus less than $1 million at all other times. So because of that, that's kind of interesting. We've got the largest buying. It's a cluster buy, though when I take a look over here, it's actually just the same guy buying twice. But we do have more purchases by more insiders happening here in the last few months, which does make it kind of interesting. So let's take a look at what this guy, so his only 2 purchases ever, which also could be notable. You know, you'd have to look a little more into this guy to just see how long he's been around. To see if it's really notable that he's never bought any stock ever or sold any stock ever in the open market, and he is now deciding to take his first purchases. And he picked up, if we look here, he increased his holdings by 70% in the first purchase and then almost doubled them again in the second purchase, which means he went from about just over 100,000 shares when he started, then he bought 71,000 and then another 160,000. So over 3x the number of shares he owned through these purchases. Obviously, there's no history for this guy. So in terms of, is this unscheduled? Certainly there's no, I mean, we could take a look at the Form 4, but we're not going to see anything here. They were purchased by a broker for Hawkby, which is his name, or Hawksby. The reporting person and his wife. Okay, yeah, it's just a normal purchase, indirectly on behalf of Hawksby Management, but that's literally his name. So definitely an unscheduled purchase. We've never seen him We've never seen him trade before. Large. It's hard to know if this is large for this guy. Again, maybe go look at Hawksby, how big of a fund they are, or how much money this guy has, basically, to see if you think $5 million is large. But definitely in terms of the rest of the buys here, large buy. In terms of how much holdings he's increasing, also large. A little bit of cluster buying here, though it's kind of spread out. I don't know if I'd really call that cluster buying. Definitely interesting. This is one I would look more into for sure. I think that's an interesting trade. Avoiding the Sharps Technology. We've got another one. These also interesting. Here we have definite cluster buying. We also, let's look at previous buying. So they do look like insiders like to buy the dip. The problem is the stock just kind of keeps going down. They timed the dip pretty well here in COVID, but besides that, again, a history of buying that is not very interesting. The only reason it kind of gets interesting is, one, we're seeing clustering here, and the only other time we saw that much clustering was back in COVID. But again, the green charts are the green bars are kind of hard to see here, but we're looking at larger green bars than ever before. So these are the largest purchase. Not only are they the largest purchases ever happening, they're all happening right at one time. So you're getting literally the five or whatever this is, five biggest purchases ever happening all within 2 weeks of each other. Or how long is this? 8/13. Yeah, within 2 weeks of each other. Is definitely pretty interesting. Not much to say about the price action except that this stock goes nowhere ever. It's just been slightly down. So very uninteresting price action. Looking at the size, we see it's just these same two guys buying. So let's see who we've got: the president and the chief investment officer, and then the CEO. So executives are definitely an interesting people to have buy. It looks like this guy's never made trades before, or at least has never really purchased. Well, he did way back, I guess, in 2018. Take a look here. So he bought, he kind of nailed the timing there with a little bit of a dip at 448. Stock went up to about $8, almost high 7. So pretty good timing on the previous purchase here. He then also bought back here, which is going to be, how long ago was that? A couple years ago, he again bought the dip. So big fan of buying the dip, this one. Also, I mean, decent timing over a long time frame. Not too bad. Picked up 3 stocks right here. In terms of holding size, we just take a look at what he had at the start of this. Okay, so those 2 previous purchases weren't really calculated up here because they're both dividend reinvestments, which I'm not going to look into right now, but he did time them well, so they're kind of unusual there. In terms of increasing size, 35, 17, 25%. So he went from about 300,000 holdings to 600,000, so doubling in size. Again, here we have not very interesting price action. Cluster buying, very interesting. Definitely unscheduled. Definitely sizable in terms of doubling his holdings. And then we actually, I think recall James Labe here, the CEO, actually has a slightly more interesting history. He also bought during that 2018 dip way back here. So again, and then he was up, what will it say, I guess, 40% in the next year, 35% in the next 6 months. So decent history. This is another one to me, like certainly interesting. This doesn't look like the most volatile stock. Not going to go up a bajillion percent, but large unscheduled purchases. This guy both of them really had a history of good previous buying. Definitely worth taking a look at, in my opinion. All right, what else do we have here? Kazin Partners, probably going to be, what do we have? A director and 10% owner. A little less interesting, obviously, than insiders. Looks like they also must be insider at BioLife Solutions, maybe MaxCyte back in the day. In terms of history, not very good. We've got their returns over all time frames. With this bad of a track record, I guess in the short term, they kind of seem to nail the short-term plays. I guess nail is probably not the right word. It looks like most of the returns came from here, where they were able to get, a solid 50% or something in the month. They also bought in size back here. Just quickly looking at this is probably a quick pass for me. Just, the downtrend, kind of interesting if you want to talk about buying the dip, but pretty small purchases. Nobody else is buying the stock, I don't think. Yeah, it's just them, it looks like. Yeah, just them buying the stock and not buying it in size, and their track record's not good. So not interesting. Just take a look at a couple more before we move on to sales. Look at 5E Advanced Materials. This one's going to be another 10% owner and or director situation. 10% owner and director, and both of them 10% owner and director. They're buying the exact same size, which is kind of odd. Let's see if they say anything. Ascend Global Investment and Meridian purchased 50,000 shares of common stock. Ascend is the owner of it. And here we've got, the same. Bluescape Restructuring, which is a wholly owned. It looks like they're different entities. Kind of odd that they're both buying $100,000. They are buying this short-term dip here, and I guess the long-term dip because this company is a bit of a disaster. Not much insider trading going on. This is obviously the biggest trades ever. Again, shout out to Atlas Precious Metals this time, nailing the top with their massive $12 million buy, or sell, Not very often you get almost 100% returns on a sale, meaning the stock is almost down 100%. This one's probably just a pass for me. It's like marginally interesting in that, the first sizable insider buys in a long time after the stock's down 75% in the last year. Maybe you could look into it, but I don't know. It doesn't meet many of the criteria, which is just like no track record, not very sizable at all in either dollar amounts or the amount of holdings increases. Not much here. Let's look at one more. Let's go look. Well, let's look at two more actually. We'll look at Amrise here. This one's interesting because it's a spinoff, which already is pretty interesting. But then you've got this insider buying, $53 million worth by 8 different insiders. Definitely very interesting. And actually, if you want to go read up about Amrise, you can do so go to joinyellowbrick.com, type in the ticker, and you can actually see a handful. So this person wrote a bullish pitch on Amrise. This person did an overview of Amrise. Well, they actually are holding the stock, and you can go read these full summaries or click and read the full write-ups if you just click on the article. But this one's certainly interesting to look at because of, again, we've got the spinoff, we've got a bunch of insider buying. In terms of holdings, it's a little off here just because the stock is brand new. So I don't know if all of the holdings are really actually reflected yet for these insiders, so they haven't been there long enough to have all their vesting and whatever it might be. If we take a look at any of these, try to quickly look at the footnotes here. It doesn't look like anything interesting in the footnotes to me. Definitely worth looking into. And bonus points, you can go quickly read write-ups on Yellowbrick about why that might be an interesting stock. And lastly, the Avidya Bancorp. Again, lots of buying here. Has not been out very long because it's a public offering. So this company just went public and bunch of insider buying. Again, I don't know how accurate these holdings are going to be because it's so newly public, but certainly interesting to just see a ton of insider buying right after earnings came, or right after the IPO came out. You're not going to be able to learn a ton, obviously, from the history of these guys. I guess this person must be a director or something. Oh, they're president. So CEO at Avidya Bancorp, but they must have been let's see what they were here, the COO at Independent Bank before. So he does have a little bit of a track record. Let's see what he looked like here. Most of these were stock repurchase. Okay, so he is selling, pretty much always selling here, which in this case, even though they were in stock repurchase plan or dividend reinvestment, I bet it's going to be just, yeah, so see, it's just going to be, these are all the stocks he owns, and it's just telling you some of the shares in there included from his dividend reinvestment and stock repurchase. So it's actually not a negative sign at all that these are from stock repurchase plans and dividend reinvestment because it's a sale, not a buy. This one is a 10b5-1 sale up here, but most of these aren't. So let's just go see what his timing looked like when he was selling. I mean, not too bad. Look, his one purchase was way down here in the 50s. Stock got up above 70, and then all of these red lines here pretty nicely ticking the top of some of these peaks here. So maybe, and then we can also just kind of look at what his returns over the longer term are. Pretty good job. I mean, 1 year, 3 for 3 win rate with 1 year returns of the stock going down 30%, the buy going up 17%. Definitely like to see that. So this is another one I think definitely worth looking into. Insiders buying after an IPO. Obviously, you're going to want to figure out exactly what's going on in the IPO, if there's any lockup situations or anything like that that could be some negative price pressure. But I think this insider buying is pretty bullish and worth taking a look at. All right, we're gonna reset filters and we're gonna go back now to look at sales and just start at the top. Again, I like to go a little longer time frame here for the insider returns. We're gonna go bearish only because I'm only interested in what their returns were for their sales. What else do we need to set here? Filed at, we'll do the 27th, and then we can sort by transaction value. All right, let's take a look here at the top, see if there's anything interesting. Klaviyo, I know they've been selling Klaviyo for a while there. Yep. We also have a short write-up. That's another one. Klaviyo, we can just come over to Yellowbrick, and I know there was a short report. So we have a couple, we've got an overview here, a fund that's holding the stock, wrote it up a little bit, and then we've got a short report by the captain's log from back in May. So certainly worth reading if you're going to take a look at Klaviyo, which I guess let's just look real quick here. Quick look at the chart. I mean, there's just been a ton of selling all through history. I don't know, it doesn't really appear to be timed particularly great. I mean, here they did start the selling right after the bump, but then the stock just kept going up way more, another 50% basically. So no crazy insider selling history here, no great history. Same if we just look at Summit Partners. This was their largest sale ever, I guess, just happened, which if we look at the number of shares, $8 million. So certainly their largest sale, which would be notable, but it's not that much larger than all these other sales. They're all kind of equally spaced out. They didn't even sell right at the peak when, if they were really timing this well, they would have sold that. So probably for me, it's nothing crazy. I personally am not super bullish on this stock anyway, but this chart wouldn't really scare me off. Nothing much there. All right, quickly looking through the list here of just like interesting stocks. We see a couple sells at Ares Management. AppLovin's been a pretty consistent seller. Coinbase, another pretty consistent seller. We'll definitely look at Power Solutions as they've had a ton of selling. Arista Networks is another one, a ton of selling. Nothing crazy, not seeing a ton of like the same top sales. If you were here, I'd probably sort by this sell to just see who the best sellers are. And in this case, positive returns means the stock went down because the insider timed it well, so they had good returns. So let's just take a look at Ares first. So picking up a little bit here, stocks going up, selling the rip a little bit. 10% in the last 3 months isn't up really enough for me to say you're selling the rip. But interesting that the purchasing kind of picked up here after a little bit of a break. Looks like it's been a lot of these two guys selling, co-founder and co-founder. Neither of them with particularly good 3-month returns, at least. We could quickly just change to like 6-month returns, see if that changes anything. No, even worse. So pretty quick for me. Nothing strikes me as particularly weird here. A ton of selling, not particularly great timing. These guys don't have great returns. All part of a 10b5-1 plan. They're not abnormally large. Easy to just kind of mark off as not particularly interesting. Already looked at Klaviyo. Let's look at Tutor Perini here. This one is definitely a selling the rip situation, up 57% in 3 months, 100% in 3 years. Also looks like a large sale. We can see from this bar, it's about at least double all of the other sales, which is definitely interesting. Also comes from a guy whose last name is Tudor, so I have to imagine he is related to Tutor Perini Corporation, which that again makes it even more interesting. So let's go look at this guy by himself. His history is okay, I guess. It's not that interesting. The stock tends to be flat-ish to down. Over a very long time frame it goes down, but I don't know how important 2-year time frame is. Again, in terms of selling, this looks like his biggest sale, 275. Got 222 down here in a sale. So definitely his biggest sale ever. So that is notable. Biggest sale ever while the stock is at the top. Yeah, look at that chart. While the stock is at the very peak. This is one of those ones though, trying to sell a high momentum stock and trying to time it right, real tough. I would certainly never try to short a stock in a situation like that, but this is one of those ones like once you start to see it peter out here and start to roll over, it's one of those ones where it's like you see the momentum starting to go down and you got insiders telling you that it's going down, and to me that's a pretty good sign of like, yeah, not a stock for me. So I definitely think that's a high signal sale for sure, or at least a notable one. Here we've got somebody with actually good returns finally. Vertiv Holdings, another one. A little bit of a selling the rip situation. Yeah, I guess it's up almost 100% since the April lows. They also timed that selling back here pretty good. Let's look over a longer time frame here. So timed this selling no good at all, obviously. The stock is way up since then, but then they have hit these peaks pretty good. Look at right here. We see them hitting the peak there. We see them nailing the peak over here in November of 2024, and now sales starting to pick up again. So notable on that front. However, these sales aren't very big is going to be a downside. These guys did, I guess, decrease their holdings by about a third. So that's notable. 30% is definitely big. When you compare it to some of this stuff, 80%, 70%, not quite as big. In terms of dollar value, they must have had a huge selling. Yeah, 210. So that's probably getting thrown off by, let's see what this guy is. Managing director. So his massive $210 million sale is going to throw off some of these numbers here, but we're not seeing him sell yet. A lot of these insiders, like we said, look how good the returns are, and you can see that in the chart. Insiders at this company tend to do a pretty good job, not you, but the rest tend to do a pretty good job timing their sales. So again, let's see, traders executed. Yeah, so nothing's going to be interesting in the footnotes there. Let's just quickly look at this person's history. Okay, only one previous sale, which obviously not very much, but they did nail the top, and this seems to be the exact same size sale. Yeah, this to me is another one where we're kind of early still. We haven't seen a ton of insider buying come in, but large sale with a few other insiders selling, a good history of timing the sells pretty well. This would be another stock that for me, especially in these like AI tech industries, you can find other stocks that don't have insider buying or that don't have insider selling that I would prefer to put money in. If I own this stock, I would probably switch into a different one. I don't own that stock, so it doesn't really affect me that much. What else do we have here? DoorDash 10b5-1 plan. I'm not even going to look at it. That this guy's been on 10b. Well, I guess this is a fast way to look at it. Not particular. It is a larger sale, but not abnormally large compared to any of these other ones. So not super interesting. Trinity Place Holdings, disaster of a company. Not interested in that stock. Already looked at Aries. AppLovin's another one. Like I said, the timing's not been great. Bunch of insider selling. Or not really that much insider selling, but this person has sold quite a few times with terrible timing. If we look at AppLovin as a whole, we can see that the selling has picked up here. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting. And we saw more selling back here. And you'll notice when the stock kind of went in this slow uptrend for a while, there was not any selling. So it seems like most of the selling is happening at a little bit higher of a price point. The stock's also up, 400%. Yeah, I mean, look back here too. Selling. And the stock has kind of flattened out since all that selling started. So I don't know if this is much larger selling back here, as we can see by this tall line. So not much, it's not the craziest insider selling, but definitely some headwinds there. And with the stock starting to maybe flatten out after this dip, I don't think the momentum has turned yet probably, but this would be one that I would definitely be keeping an eye on if I own the stock. When you see this level of selling, and if that stock starts to flatten out there, probably not good things ahead. Don't want to spend all day going through all of these. You can go through some on your own, but here, this one's going to be a huge, I mean, look at this. Crazy amounts of insider selling. Crazy amounts of insider selling, with the stock up 300% in the last year, 100% in the last 3 months. Basically no history of large selling. Some sporadic sales in here, a bunch of buys that worked out very well for these people down here in the $2 range. Massive run up, massive selling, cluster selling. No history here. None of these people have really sold before, which that in and of itself, having insiders who have never sold now selling all of them, also pretty interesting. I'd prefer if they had sold a bunch before and timed them all perfectly, but this is also this is definitely a better signal than if their previous sales didn't work out. So to me, this is like a screaming avoid. Look, we've hit the peak, the stock's flattened out for a while, started to turn down. Obviously with these high momentum stocks, that could turn back up real quickly, but also in a very, very popular index or sector, I guess would be the better term, or industry. You could probably find something that doesn't have a bunch of insiders dumping the stock if you wanted to buy something in that industry. That's going to be all for today. You can go take a look at CEOWatcher.com. Go take a look through all these filings for yourself. Definitely a few interesting ones in there and a lot that we didn't go through. Like I said, come filter by insider returns. Take a look at what the best performing insiders are buying or selling. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the best insider stock trades every day.